Welcome to Ground School. This is going to be one of the first of several videos in a series where we're going to walk you through all of those concepts that you need to be able to confidently make your first jump. And the first thing that we need to begin with is the skydiving gear that's going to make this all possible. So one of the first things that you're going to notice is that we've got our own terms. So just like a pilot or a surgeon has their own terminology that they use, we do the same thing in skydiving. And at first, it might be a little bit difficult to remember what all these terms are, but don't worry. We're just going to give you the basics that you need for these first few jumps. And to help you master these terms, I've created a free downloadable checklist for you. The link can be found in the description box. We're going to break this down into three parts. The first is going to be what are those items that you can see when everything is closed up. Second part is going to be what can we see once everything is open. And third is going to be the personal equipment that you're going to be putting on for all of your student jumps. So let's begin with that first part. As you can see, I'm wearing my skydiving rig and it consists of an integrated harness. You can see 2 leg straps, 1 chest strap is going to keep me securely in here. And then on the back, I've actually got 2 parachutes. The one on the bottom, which we're going to talk about more, is my main parachute, and then I've got a backup or a reserve parachute that's at the top. Okay, so let's talk more about what are the things that we can see when everything is still closed up. So like I said, we've got 2 parachutes. Our main parachute is down here, and our reserve parachute is going to be up here. And the way that everything stays closed is, I can open these flaps just to show you, is we've got 2 closing pins. So a little bit of a difference in the shape. Our main is curved while our reserve pin is straight, but they're both closing pins, so they keep things closed. Once those pins are removed, now things are able to open up. And how they're going to open up, at least for the main parachute, is we are going to grab our deployment handle. These come in different styles, and this one here looks like this, but there's other different styles out there. Another very common one, especially on student rigs, is going to be one that kind of looks like a hacky sack or a little ball, but doesn't matter. They're all different types of deployment handles. So on your jump, when it's time for you to deploy your parachute, you're going to grab your deployment handle and you're actually going to throw it out into the wind. And that's going to enable this closing pin to be pulled, which will allow everything to open up. Now, let's say we were not too happy with the main parachute that came out and we want to get rid of it because we're having a problem, a malfunction, something's going on. We're going to actually pull this red handle here on the front. It's part of our emergency handles, and it's called the cutaway handle. So when I want to get rid of that malfunctioning main parachute, I want to cut it away. So I'm going to pull my cutaway handle. As soon as I pull my cutaway handle, I'm going to go and pull my reserve handle, which is located on the other side. Again, there's a few different styles of reserve handles out there. There are some that look like this and some that look like metal D-rings. But either way, as soon as I pull my cutaway handle, I'm going to go ahead and pull my reserve handle. And as you can see from earlier when I was wearing it, this is where my chest strap is located. And again, I've got the 2 leg straps that are part of the harness. Some other things that we can see is we've got these rings here. If you count them, there's 1, 2, 3 of them. This is actually called the 3-ring system, and this is going to be what attaches your main parachute to your harness. We also have 2 backup devices. The first one is located right here, or at least this is part of the system. This is the reserve static line, or RSL. This is a really difficult term for most people to remember. It's going to be easier to see how it functions once I pull everything out. But just so you know, right now, this little tab and this clasp here is part of your RSL. And there are going to be times that we'll talk about later when you might actually want to disconnect this backup system. And the way that you do that is by simply pulling the tab. Now, sometimes these tabs are yellow, sometimes they're red. Really doesn't matter. Again, there are some slight variations. So that's one of our backup systems. The other backup system on my personal equipment is actually located under this flap. And as you can see here, this is part of what we call our automatic activation device, or AAD. Again, another term that's not so easy to remember. But essentially what it does is it is a little computer that is keeping track of both your speed as well as your altitude. So if you are going too fast or too low, it's going to assume that you do not have a functional parachute out, and it is going to go ahead and activate your reserve parachute for you. Again, it's a backup device. We don't rely on any of these. If we're having a problem with our parachute and we need to do emergency procedures, again, we want to grab our red cutaway handle to cut away our main parachute, and then pull our silver reserve handle afterwards. So those are all the terms that are items that we can see when everything is closed up. So let's go ahead and review them. So this right here, these rings, remember there's 3 of them, and that's an easier one to remember. They're called the 3 rings. We've got the parts of our harness, the chest strap, and 2 leg straps. And once you put the rig on for the first time, it's going to be really easy to see what those are. We have our emergency handles in case we need to get rid of our main parachute. Our red is our cutaway to cut away that main parachute. And then we would be pulling our silver or reserve parachute handle. On this side, if we open this flap, we can see that this is the main closing pin. And remember, the reserve has a straight closing pin. Again, the closing pin is what keeps things closed. So if on your jump, when it's time for you to deploy your parachute, you're going to grab your deployment handle, throw that out. That's going to end up causing this main pin to be pulled, and now things can open up. We're going to see that in a moment. The last thing that we already talked about is our AAD, automatic activation device. Again, that's one of our backups. The little computer that is sensing both your speed as well as your altitude. So in case you're going too fast at too low of an altitude, it should be activating your reserve parachute for you. So now we're going to go ahead and open everything up. Typically, a normal deployment is going to take about 4 to 5 seconds. And like I've said previously, the way that you're going to start this process is by grabbing on to your deployment handle at the appropriate altitude. You're going to throw it out into the wind. And as you can see, what is attached to our deployment handle is this piece of fabric here called the pilot chute. This is one of those terms that is, again, difficult to remember. There's no really good way to remember it, except this is the first little chute that comes out before your main parachute. So your pilot chute is going to inflate in the wind. And as you continue to fall away for just a brief moment in time, attached on the pilot chute bridle is the actual main closing pin. And as you fall away from it while this is inflated in the wind, this is going to pull the closing pin out. And now you can see the closing pin is no longer here, so things can actually open up. The next part that we have that comes out is what actually contains your main parachute. And this is called your deployment bag. A lot of times people don't like to say the whole term deployment bag, so you'll hear a lot of people calling it the D bag. Your deployment bag is going to come out. These are actually the lines to the parachute. Once you get to full line stretch, then your main parachute is going to be able to come out of the deployment bag. Now the parachute comes out of the deployment bag or D bag, and it will start to be able to inflate now. We're going to have this rectangular piece of fabric here that's going to slide down the lines, and thankfully this is just called the slider. So your slider slides down the lines. This allows the parachute to continue opening up and inflating as the wind goes into it. New things that we can see are these pieces of black webbing here. There are 2 sets of them. These are called your risers. So this webbing is going to be rising up from your shoulders, from the 3 rings actually. The risers rise up from the 3 rings and they go to our main parachute lines. Like I said, there's 2 sets, and the interesting part to note is here on the rear risers. So those are going to be the ones when you're looking up, they're going to be right here in your face essentially. These are our brake toggles or steering toggles. Again, these have so many different synonyms, so that's why I'm just going to kind of use all of them. So your brake toggles are what is going to allow us to steer the main parachute when we want to. And one thing to note is our parachute is actually packed in a half brake setting, so it's not in full flight when it first opens. Again, later on, we're going to go through this a few more times, but to be able to fly your parachute, you're actually going to put your hand into your brake toggle, then both of them at the same time, you're going to pull down to release that excess, and then once your hands go all the way back up, now your parachute is going to be in full flight, and this is going to be how you steer your parachute, as well as when you come in for landing, you're going to brake a little bit, so hopefully have a little bit softer landing. So things that we can see now. Again, these are our risers. They rise up from our shoulders to the main parachute lines. This piece of fabric here was called our slider because it will slide down the lines during inflation. The other things to remember, no longer needed, but this is how the whole process started, is grabbed onto my deployment handle, threw this out, and attached to my deployment handle is my pilot chute. My pilot chute has a bridle, and on that bridle was what was keeping everything closed. This is that main closing pin. So once that closing pin was pulled and everything could come open, my deployment bag is what contained the main parachute, also known as the D bag. So let's go back to talk about one of our backup systems. So let's say something happens, we have a problem with our main parachute and we need to cut it away. If you'll remember, we would pull that red cutaway handle. And hopefully what you can see here is attached to the red cutaway handle, there's these two yellow cables. So one comes up to this side and it actually ends right here, and the other goes over to the other side. So by pulling that red cutaway handle, I'm going to be pulling this yellow cables out with that handle, and this is going to be how the risers and main parachute are detached from me. And then of course, once I pull my cutaway handle, I would want to pull my reserve handle immediately. But now we have a better idea of how one of our backup systems, the RSL, Reserve Static Line, works. So it is actually attached on the side of one of our risers. So once I cut away my malfunctioning parachute along with the risers, if this is attached, it will actually get pulled, and it is just simply Velcroed down here along the side. This black, I know it's a little bit tricky to follow, but we can follow it all the way back and see that it continues on to my reserve parachute closing pin. So if my RSL is attached on the side of my risers, when I cut away, it should automatically pull my reserve pin out, causing activation of my reserve parachute. But again, it's a backup. So whenever I pull my cutaway handle, I want to ensure that I'm pulling my reserve handle as well. So as a quick review, our other backup device is partly shown here. This one is currently off, but if it was on, it would be monitoring both my speed and my altitude. So in case I'm going too fast, too low, it should also be able to activate my reserve parachute.
Okay, the third part of our equipment is our personal accessories, and those include shoes that you're going to be wearing. We don't really want to have any boots that have hooks on them because that can snag parachute lines, and we don't want to wear sandals, so we want to make sure we've got a closed toe and a closed heel shoe that does not have any hooks. We're going to be wearing a helmet, an altimeter that reads in thousands of feet depending on where you're jumping. Sometimes they'll have an analog face as shown here, and sometimes they'll be fully digital. Goggles, gloves if it's cold enough when you're jumping, a jumpsuit, and this is going to help to adjust your fall rate for your instructors, as well as give them something to hold on to typically, as well as protect your clothing on landing. And typically there's also a one-way radio that's put on you so that when you're under the parachute, your instructor can give you instructions to guide you on down to where you're supposed to land. The altimeter that you're going to wear is going to go on your left hand, and you're going to be going through about 1,000 feet every 5 to 6 seconds. So you want to make sure that you're going to check your altitude approximately every 5 seconds, which is roughly 1,000 feet, after every maneuver. Whenever you're having problems in free fall and under canopy, this is key because a lot of times we go and we try to be problem solvers, but the first thing that we always have to do is check to make sure that we have the altitude to try to solve our problems. Otherwise, we may just have to go to our plan B. And if at any point on your jump you cannot determine what your altitude is because your altimeter flew off your hand or it's clearly malfunctioning, whatever the reason, at this point you just want to pull. You will be given 3 equipment checks by your instructor, and actually throughout your skydiving career, you always want to check your equipment 3 times before your jump. So the times that you should be getting your equipment check is going to be before you even put the equipment on. There's going to be a very thorough gear check. Before you board the aircraft, that will be your second gear check. And then just a few minutes before exiting the aircraft is the third and final check. Now remember, although your instructor is going to give you these 3 equipment checks, it's actually your responsibility to make sure that you get those equipment checks. If you're not sure that you got one, ask your instructor.
Are you ready to make these terms second nature? Remember that the free downloadable checklist is waiting for you. Just click the link in the description to get your copy and take the next step towards your first jump.